we welcome our keynote speaker, Chetty, the William A. Ackman Professor of Public Economics at Harvard University, as well as Director of Opportunity Insights.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm going to talk about how I think we can make big strides in improving chances for upward mobility, especially for kids from lower income backgrounds in our own communities, in our own institutions, at places like NJCU and in Jersey City and so forth at a very local level. But I want to start at a much bigger picture national level to set the stage by talking about the American dream, which is of course a complicated, multifaceted concept that can mean different things to different people. But I want to distill it to one simple statistic that we can measure systematically in the data, which is a cornerstone aspect, I think, of the American dream for many immigrants like my own parents, that this is, a country where through hard work, any child can go on to have a higher standard of living than their parents did. And so I think that's what America means to lots of people. And so in a study I did with my collaborators a few years ago, we set about to assess the extent to which America actually lives up to that aspiration. And what we did is computed a very simple measure: what fraction of children actually go on to earn more than their parents did. This dramatic trend of the fading American dream, of course, is of central interest for economists like myself. It's also a fundamental interest from a political and social perspective, because I think it's this very trend that underlies a lot of the frustration that Americans around the United States are expressing. And I think that's reflected in the political outcomes and a lot of the social conversation that we're seeing in the US today. So motivated by this broad trend, in our research and policy group here at Harvard, Opportunity Insights, we're focused on the very big picture question of what is driving that fading American dream and how can we, going forward, restore the American dream. This is not just about jobs. Bringing more jobs to Jersey City would not necessarily itself translate to better outcomes for the low-income kids growing up there. The roots of economic opportunity are incredibly local. When you have that view of the world, I think you naturally think about three different ways to increase economic opportunity for a given child. The first is to try to reduce segregation. Maybe we can just help more families move to those higher opportunity areas. Now, recognizing that you can't move everyone, a second complementary approach is to make place-based investments. So try to increase upward mobility in low opportunity areas rather than moving people to different parts of the city. How can you bring opportunity to people in a given place? And then finally, and I think relevant to a lot of you, thinking about the role of higher education. After kids are age 18, the key touch point is not the house in which they're living, but typically the college that they're attending. And I think there's a big role that places like NJCU can play in amplifying the impacts of the higher education system.
American Dream is obviously a very important term, not only in the United States, but around the world. I'd love to hear your points of view about how immigrants, especially immigrants that will come to the United States in their teenage years, see this American dream.
What we find quite consistently is that immigrant kids do very well in terms of rates of upward mobility. And that's true for immigrants across all places. It's not immigrants from one particular set of countries. Immigrants pretty uniformly of all races and ethnicities do well relative to natives growing up in families at comparable income. Now, one potential explanation for that pattern is that the parents who immigrate to the US are often underplaced relative to where they could be. So like the canonical story that you sometimes hear is the engineer who comes and is not able to find a job in the US and is ending up, driving a taxi cab or something like that and ends up with a lower level of income. So that's a person who has a lot of human capital, maybe investing a lot in their kids. Their kids have a very good background in a certain sense. And we end up seeing very high rates of upward mobility for the immigrant kids from those kinds of families. Now, that being said, it's very important even for immigrants which neighborhoods that they grow up in. So the maps that I was showing you, you should think of it as there's a level shift up for the immigrants in terms of their rates of upward mobility. But still, if you're growing up in the Southeast or if you're growing up in the red part of Jersey City instead of the blue parts of the maps that I was showing you, you see big differences in immigrant kids' outcomes. So the same kind of factors apply, but there's kind of think of it as an added bonus because you're coming from this background where maybe on average your parents have a slightly higher level of education or something like that.